Kieran Doherty had spent enough time as a member of the Real IRA to know what would happen next.
To be taken away by so-called friends, to be taken to a country road, to have his dignity stripped from him, to be stripped almost naked, to be bound, and to be executed in the worst possible way on a country lane. It was horrific that that would be visited upon a young man, upon his family. And the most hurtful thing to me, as being a lifelong Republican, is the people who carried out this heinous murder attack on a young man masquerade as being Republicans. That is the most repulsive thing to me. And I believe they're watching this tonight. And if you think you're proud of yourself, don't be.
I can't get it out of my head. The way they left him lying on the road, stripped naked, gagged, brutally murdered. I'll never get it out of my head. And I don't know why they done it.
According to the Real IRA, Kieran Doherty was killed because he had links to the drugs trade. Whatever the truth, his killing appears to be part of a frightening spiral of Republican violence against drug dealers in which different groups are vying with each other to take the toughest stand in the city. Kieran Doherty appears to be a victim of that struggle, but his killers claim that as a senior member of the Real IRA, he knew the risks.
I personally have no doubt that Kieran knew who shot him. Kieran left the home that he shared with his lifelong sweetheart, a girl he was going to marry in 2 months' time, and their child. To go and meet someone I'm sure he regarded as a friend. God only knows the horror that Kieran experienced, the fear of a so-called friend who lured him to his death. To blacken his name by saying that somehow he had become part of a criminal gang, to say that he'd become involved in some drug episode of which no evidence has been put forward.
The gang had already decided that they would not tolerate any link to drugs.
Well, these organisations, including the Real IRA, present themselves as militaristic, disciplined, cause-driven, and when they're tainted by the suggestion of crime, that damages them. And when they're damaged, they respond in this way. They take their own action and they deliver their own justice. And Kieran Doherty was a victim of that instant justice.
As a member of the Real IRA, Kieran Doherty was subject to a different set of rules.
If he had actually been a civilian, he would have perhaps been put out of the country, or there would have been a punishment attack carried out on him, a six-pack, whereby someone is shot in the elbows, the ankles and the knees. But because he was a Real IRA member, and because the organisation has such a strong anti-drugs policy, and because it is implementing that policy against ordinary people in Derry, it took a very, very tough stance when one of its own members violated Real IRA rules.
Kieran Doherty, here at his sister's wedding, had a criminal past. He was jailed for an armed robbery at a hotel in Donegal. The money was to go to the Real IRA. In Portlaoise Jail, he became the officer commanding of the Real IRA prisoners.
Kieran Doherty was 24 at that stage, which is very young to be an OC in a jail. There were fewer Real IRA prisoners in the prison than there are now, so maybe that is why he rose through the ranks. He was a very relaxed person. He had a happy-go-lucky attitude. I wouldn't have thought he was the most politically astute Republican I've ever interviewed, but he certainly wasn't stupid.
He served 4 years in Portlaoise Jail.